mercy. Ain't no mercy. Huh. Got that purple Lamborghini lurking.
Suicide Squad is directed by David Ayer and stars Margot Robbie, Will Smith, Jared Leto, Joel Kinnaman, Viola Davis, Jai Courtney, Cara Delevingne, amongst many others, and is the story of these 6 criminals who are brought together to form a task force which is being headed by a woman named Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis, and she plans to use this task force to save the world whenever disaster hits, and it just so happens to be happening at that time. So, now if you've been following the marketing campaign for this movie has been marketed extremely well, with all sorts of bright, vivid colors and a lot of humor, something that a lot of people have been complaining about in the last 2 DC films because there wasn't enough of that stuff. So naturally, everyone was really excited to see what this movie had to offer, and I myself was really pumped out to see what DC had come up with this time, because when it comes to these characters, I know these characters extremely well. I really want them to be done well, especially characters like Harley Quinn and Deadshot. So what did I think of this movie? I had fun with it. It was a fun film. I had a great time. But does that make it a good movie? No. Suicide Squad is honestly just alright. That said, there are a lot of pros to this movie, so let me start with the pros. For starters, in terms of acting, the movie does a pretty good job. Everybody has acted their full potential here. Will Smith does an amazing job as Deadshot. He's actually one of the most surprising performances in the entire movie. Margot Robbie steals this movie for the most part as Harley Quinn. She was pitch perfect. She was ripped right out of the comics, right out of the animated series. They did her character extremely well, and the justice done to that character, phenomenal. That was easily one of the best aspects of the entire film, if not the best aspect. I can't believe I'm about to say this actually, but I actually thought Captain Boomerang was a pretty fun character. I wish he had more to do in the film and say more lines, but his character was entertaining. I liked seeing his character on screen. I wanted more of his character. And last but not least, let's talk about Jared Leto as the Joker, because he does a really good job, and he is actually fantastic. This is one of the most controversial points of the film because many people have been concerned what kind of a portrayal he may have. It's a very different portrayal. It's not like Heath Ledger's Joker at all. So if you're thinking that it's going to be a lot like that, you might be very disappointed because it's a very different Joker. This guy is unhinged. He's crazy. There's a lot of interesting stuff with this Joker. It's quite well done. I think Jared Leto really brings his A game to this. Yes, he's not in the movie for that long. He has barely 15 minutes in the entire film because they really want to just set up his character at this point. But even then, the scenes which he had did leave an impact, and I wanted to see more of this character in the future. The soundtrack was great. I love the soundtrack of this movie, including the score. There's 2 versions of this soundtrack. There's the score soundtrack, and then there's the song soundtrack, and they're both pretty amazing. Direction of the movie. David Ayer is a really good director. He has done a good job. There are some beautifully directed sequences in this movie. Many script elements ripped right out of the comic books. This movie did feel like a flowing comic book at times, and they did do a very good job with some of the dialogue also for these characters. Some of their introductions, some of their origins were written extremely well. So yeah, most of the aspects of this movie are positive. I did like a lot of the stuff. Here's the stuff that I didn't like about it. Someone in the editing department, and I don't think it was anything to do with the crew of this film, I think it's something to do with WB, because they walked in last time for the theatrical BVS version and they cut that thing apart, and there are reports that confirm that. And I think the same things happened here. A WB executive walked in and just shred this movie apart, because there are so many things in this movie that are just gone. There's a lot of scenes which just stop in the middle of nowhere, and there are some explanations which are not given to things. While it's a coherent story, there are certain elements of the things like character development which are just thrown out the window for more action sequences and more flashy music playing in the background. And I'm all for that stuff, except that I really wanted to know more about these characters, because if you're a comic book fan, you will probably not mind that because they do service to the characters that need to be done service to. But if you want to watch a film, you have to do that service. You have to tell people about certain characters, and unfortunately the script really lacks that at times, and it probably has to do a lot with the editing. Something tells me that there's a lot of footage lying somewhere with origin sequences and origins for these characters, for some of these other characters, because aside from Deadshot, Harley Quinn, and El Diablo for the most part, most of these other characters really don't get that much of an origin, and even then when they get it, it's not that great. It's very brief and very dull. Another problem I had was that the villain of this movie was extremely bland. In fact, there was a point where some scene is going on, it's taking up all these characters' efforts, and after the while, there is a scene which happens where the villain is reintroduced again, and you're just like, oh, I completely forgot you were in this movie. Glad to know you're still around, so okay, I guess we still have some movie left. And this character, this villain, is really not that appealing. I'm not going to spoil who the villain is just in case you do not know who the villain is. But the fact that it's not that interesting is just sad because I didn't feel invested in it at all. It felt like it was tacked on as the villain because you didn't need this. Another problem I had was the pace of this movie. A very strange pace. The first hour goes by in a blink, but it's not a good blink. It doesn't feel like, oh, it's a fast-paced action movie, so I'm enjoying this. It's a nice, fast-paced thrill ride, and I should be invested in it. No, it felt more like it was a quick, fast movie that just went by your eyes, and you had no time to process what just happened. It wasn't incoherent. It was just that, oh, a lot happened there. Maybe you could have taken a little bit more time in that? But do you know what the worst part of the movie was for me? After the first 2/3, the first act is amazing, the second act is alright, but the third act crumbles it to the ground, and it's a gigantic, big, hot mess. And it's really upsetting because it was going pretty decently. In fact, there is a scene ending the second act of the film which hints at a perfect third act. They build it up brilliantly, but for some reason, it just crumbles apart, and you don't feel the impact which the scene is giving to you, which is why when I walked out at the end of the film, I didn't feel closure. I didn't feel complete. And it's because I felt like there is a lot from this movie that didn't even make it into the final cut. Scenes from the trailers are not in the final cut of this movie. Guys, in the end, Suicide Squad was a fun film, I guess, but it wasn't a great movie. It was just alright. It had some great aspects to it. There was a lot to like, but there was a lot to dislike as well. I'm really split on this movie, but I'm still gonna say what I have to say. I'm gonna give this the rating which I was originally gonna give Batman v Superman's theatrical version. I'm gonna give Suicide Squad a 6.5 out of 10. It's not as bad as the critics are saying, but it's still really, really weak. Guys, what did you think of Suicide Squad? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what you thought of it. If you liked the movie more than I did, and if you have some opinions to offer, please do. Free place. No one's gonna criticize you for anything. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys later.
Don't tell me what to do.